So welcome everyone. So again, we're back at the Black Mental Wellness Lounge. Here again for another video, doing our continuing with our critical conversation series. And so I'll get in and pull my guest in 1 second, but I do want to highlight this fundraiser that we're currently doing. We have about 12 days left on the fundraiser. And so what we're hoping to do here at the Black Mental Wellness Lounge is to expand the resources and the things that we have as a part of this YouTube channel. So we want to build out a website, get some more resources on that website from different agencies centered on Black mental health and Black mental wellness. We want to be able to promote the videos widely and to also be able to pay our guests that spend their time to be here and volunteer their time and their knowledge as a part of this. But we really want to take this to another major level. I've been excited by the feedback so far. We're over 40% into our goal. And so the link will be a part of this video. It's on a crowdsourcing website called Spread Karma, which is Black owned. And so there aren't too many of those. And so we're excited to be partnering with them to be able to do this. And so please tell a friend if you're interested. Please consider donating. If not, definitely share this information with other people, because we don't know who this might impact. So I appreciate that, and thank you all so much. And so without further ado, today we're jumping into some conversations. I wanted to pull on some young Black professionals in this mental health space that are really doing some really amazing things. They're all licensed clinicians. They all have different passions and different expertise, but oftentimes, like, being a young Black professional in a mental health space can be challenging. It can be difficult. There are so many different perspectives that you carry into a space that you want to prioritize, that you think are important to the Black mental health experience. And sometimes you're overlooked because of your age, because of your race, or sexual orientation or gender identity. And so there are so many different things that we have in this space that we really want to highlight. And I wanted to bring some on that could really talk from their own perspective, and we can glean some of the things that they encounter, that they go through, and also what they want for this field. Like, what from their perspective needs to happen in this field, that we can have a better field around Black mental health, how we can continue to highlight all Black voices as we continue to do this. And so I am excited to reveal my other three guests today. And so I'll have them introduce themselves, but on behalf of me, I appreciate each of you all being here and sharing your knowledge and your expertise as a part of this. I appreciate you all in the work that you all are doing. So what I'm going to do is that I am going to kick it off, and Adam, if you could go ahead and introduce yourself, that would be great.
My fault, my mic was muted. My name is Adam Johnson. I'm a licensed clinical professional counselor in the state of Maryland. Currently, I'm the Family Services Program Manager at Roberta's House, a grief counseling center located in Baltimore, Maryland.
So I'm going to kick it over to Aijahlon.
Hey, y'all. I'm Aijahlon Carden. I'm a licensed master social worker with the Tennessee Department of Mental Health and Substance Abuse Services. I am currently a project director over Connect 2, which is a youth and young adult suicide prevention program for 10 to 24 years old. And I also do some PRN work at a psychiatric hospital doing intake assessments.
Awesome. Fantastic. Thank you for being on. And so last but not least, Karen.
Hi, everybody. My name is Karen. I am a licensed clinical professional counselor in Maryland and a licensed professional counselor in Virginia. I currently work at a private practice in Towson called East Towson Psychological Services, where I see young adults on up with a variety of symptomology and pathology. Outside of that, I am in my third year, thank you, Jesus, of my clinical psychology doctoral program. So pray for me as I continue on this journey. With that, my particular interest is in neuropsychology and diversity issues within that field.
Yeah, I would definitely be praying and fasting for you on that. But yeah, so so excited to have you all here. So I want to kick it off first to have people get to know a little more about you. You all talked about the great things that you all are doing, but what got you all into this space? Like, this isn't one that a lot of people go into, especially become therapists in. We still only represent about 5% of all licensed therapists in the field. And so what in particular got you all interested to going into this field? Like, Aijahlon, we'll start with you.
Well, mine actually started in undergrad. So I came from a small rural town, Giles County, Pulaski, Tennessee, home of the KKK. So I went off to school and I started experiencing some anxiety symptoms. So when I was on campus, never had been to a therapist before or anything. So going to the on-campus counseling center, that's what got me into it. So I at first didn't know if I wanted to do marriage and family therapy or just go into LPC or LMSW. So the further I got into my own recovery, I decided to go for an LMSW since it comes from a systems perspective.
That's dope. That's cool. Especially taking your own experience and wanting to get into it and give back. Like, that's awesome. Either Adam or Karen, you guys can go next.
So I guess really, if we being real. So as a kid, I wanted to, well, actually I thought I was gonna be a scientist, but STEM is not my thing. So I thought I was gonna go into a field, just for that cliche, just to help people, make the world a better place, one person at a time. And that was pretty much my mission all the way up until I graduated undergrad and got into grad school, knowing that, to be marketable, I should probably get a license. But as I started going through that process, I started looking at, what's missing from the narrative. And typically what's missing from the narrative is people of color. And that is by way of like the clients. Well, actually, that's disproportionately. So you see a lot of people of color coming in for services, whether that's like health related, mental health related. There's a clear disparity, but the practitioners, the clinicians, they're most often white folk. And with that being said, there's a whole bunch of historical context that speaks to people's resistance, particularly people of color's resistance to seek said services. So in order to kind of address that disparity, I chose to go full force ahead into my licensure and begin to speak to that particular system to really bring some accountability to why the system was set up in the way that it was. We can go down a whole rabbit hole with that. But also to provide marginalized populations and people with intersectionalities similar to mine, the services that would be most beneficial for us. It's kind of like a for us, by us type of thing, because it's not a one size fits all intervention. And that's the way all of the theories are shaped, and they don't have people of color in mind. So I wanted to speak directly to that.
Yeah, that's really dope. The mental health field has not been, for us, period. Like, it's only very recently have we started to unpack like these theories where people have given credibility to these theories that are centered on us and can really like dissect those and use those in like therapeutic settings, because for a long time it just hasn't been. So yeah, well, I'm glad that you're in this space for sure. Adam, if you want to wrap us up on this one.
Yeah, so I got into mental health in undergrad. Originally I was a sports management major, and then I needed a health credit. So all the other health classes were filled, so the only one left was mental health. So I was just like, all right, I'll take it. I'll just get the quick credit and be out. But when I took the class and I saw, one, the stigma that's attached to mental health in the Black community, two, the disparities, and three, the lack of African Americans in the field overall, I was like, so just like, oh my God, I had to do something about this. Like, our people are suffering and really like no one's doing anything about it. So that just gave me the passion to just jump right in the field and to help out, especially in Baltimore City, where there's so many disparities in so many ways. That's a different story for a different day. So I just wanted just to show African Americans, especially males, like, hey, like this is an issue, this is a problem. And there are people in the field that look like you who want to help you. And so, and just try to get away from the stigma of we don't go see it, or people have so many negative mental health experiences that like you can have there is a way you can have a positive one with a Black therapist. So that's what made me want to get into the field.
Yeah, and that's really dope. And, you know, you are as much of a unicorn as you could possibly be without a horn coming out of your head. You know, there just aren't a lot of Black male therapists, period. And two, you know, we're probably getting into this later, but, you know, working with kids too, like you know, have worked with kids before getting into the space that you're in now. And so, you know, it's really, you know, it's really, really cool. And, you know, I'm glad that you're in this space. Glad that each of you are in this space. And so with that you know, it's not always, you know, flowers and rainbows and unicorns and all that good stuff. Like, you know, being young, Black, talented, gifted in this space. So is there anything, like any challenges that you all have faced, particularly in this space, that you want to speak to now? And, you know, as much as you're comfortable with, you know, Karen, we'll start with you, but is there anything, like any challenges that you've particularly faced in this space?
There have been plenty. I think, and you know, the institution where I got my master's, you know, it's a great program, but ultimately there were missing pieces. I was one of two Black women in my program within our cohort, so we weren't really all that diverse. So a lot of the perspectives really didn't apply. There was nothing really that felt like home as far as theory-based, and that's because I wasn't part of any of those theories. So it was super difficult for me to connect with and commit to a particular orientation over the other, because I just didn't see myself or people that looked like me within those theories or those systems. So just challenging at I think they were probably glad to have me graduate, but just speaking directly to those power structures was difficult, especially if, you know, I'm one of two. So there's a feeling of tokenism in those moments, and tokenism isn't associated with positive outcomes, nor does it really lead to increased cultural awareness. And I think people tend to get stuck on the trigger word or hot button topic of cultural competence, which suggests to me that there's an end and there isn't. So that was an issue. But then when I got into the field, and we can talk about the money being an issue in itself, because it's not cheap to be licensed. So if you don't have, you know, the financial wherewithal that others may have, then you're at a disadvantage, and you have to, keeping the license is expensive. So every 2 years, I'm constantly shelling out $300 some to the board to make sure that I can still be able to do this work, which can be challenging in itself. But in addition to that, I think the thing that really was most difficult for me in the beginning was that I came into the field in my early 20s. So I was looked at it as a baby. So it's like, you have training, but you don't have life experience. So can you really help me? So I think working through and addressing a lot of those particular barriers was difficult. And I was fortunate enough to be employed at a Black-owned outpatient company. So I had really good supervision with my supervisor to be able to work through those barriers. But I also understand that everyone isn't as fortunate as me to have those good supervisory experiences. So I'm fortunate and privileged in that way. But those are some of the main barriers that I've seen so far. Now, not so much.
Yeah, like those are, you know, those are definitely definitely tough. You know, I don't, again, because I'm not licensed, I don't have the the money thing, but I know that that's a barrier to people, you know, being in this space. And You know, people always take young people as like not being experienced, like you don't have life experiences. I know younger people that have gone through and been through more life than older adults have. Like, you know, it depends on so many other factors. And so like to limit and box somebody in to that is so, you know, it's so wild to me. Adam, you want to jump in?
Yeah, so mine really came in like professionally. Where I did my internship at in grad school, I was the only African American male, and that was out of maybe like 60 clinicians. And the crazy thing was is that I noticed when I first got in, every time there's a client or a child who was a Black male, oh, give him to Adam. Oh, give him to Adam. As soon as oh, he can figure it out. Oh, he's just like that. It's like they're glad to have you, but they don't really get the opportunity to get to know you or your culture or anything like that. So I think that was kind of always the excuse of, oh, here's this little young Black boy, give it to the Black male, and not even take the time to really get to understand the child, the client, what they're going through, their background. So that was always my job. I always had to kind of like the ones that the other clinicians were just afraid to deal with, I had to deal with them. Like my caseload when I was in grad school was pretty much the caseload no one else wanted. And it was predominantly young boys. So that was a big thing. And the other thing is also age. No one really takes you seriously. So they just kind of just look at you, whatever you have to, when you speak up, it's just kind of like, oh, whatever. Or it's kind of like, oh, you haven't been in the field long enough. Oh, you're just getting out of grad school. Oh, like this is your first job. This is your second opportunity. Oh, you've only worked with this population. So, and it's always kind of like, there's always a knock. And like, even like everybody says, oh, we want a Black male. But oftentimes it's really like, you guys don't do anything to like have my voice being heard or like even value my opinion, value my experience and things like that. So that's always been like such a challenge. I think now it's gotten a lot better, especially because I'm working for a Black organization. But before then, those were definitely like the biggest challenges that I faced.
No, that's cool. That's cool. You know, we'll touch on this in a minute, but having that, you know, like that tokenism piece and people feeling like, you know, you there, so you know, you basically get typecast. It's like you there, and this is who you cover because you know, because because you're you. This is you know, this is who you know who you cover. So, but yeah, Aijahlon, you want to jump into this one?
Yeah, so mine more so also came from graduate school. And so my first graduate internship was working for Mobile Crisis. So that's seeing people, seeing folks in jails, hospitals, their homes, if they're having psychiatric crises, suicidal, homicidal, or psychosis. I remember this one instance where I had just started and I was off of clinical supervision, and I made a recommendation to refer someone for inpatient treatment. And no one could seem to get her place because it was a neurological disorder that was presenting as a psychiatric psychosis. So I remember getting a voicemail and multiple phone calls from this client's mother telling me that, you know, she spoke with hospital staff who said that I looked like I didn't know what I was doing because I was so young. And she was just basically cussing me out without cussing me. And so I was very upset about that and how someone was responding to me that way. Another instance, I'm seeing predominantly white folks in crisis. So Tennessee is very white. And sometimes I would have to go in and see people who were white supremacists or blatantly racist. So I was more so afraid of going to see them because I was Black and not because they were experiencing a mental health crisis. And after I graduated from my master's program, I decided that, you know, I wanted to take a step back from doing direct practice and try to put my foot in for macro practice. So my supervisor at the time, for crisis, she said, it's going to be kind of hard to get into that macro space. Like, so you should probably just stick with doing micro practice for a little while and then, see where you can make it. And I wasn't getting paid much at all. And I knew I wanted to become licensed. So I knew I couldn't get the certifications and the experience that I really wanted in order to become a licensed clinical social worker without having the income for it. So, yeah, it was twofold for me.
Yeah, that is tough. I mean, even hearing you saying like the population that you work with and, like what you experience on a daily, like I don't know if I could do that. Like, I honestly don't know if I could do that. But, yeah, like I appreciate that. And it's so, it's good for, people who are listening, especially like young professionals, to understand that like this stuff is commonplace, like, getting those things. Like I remember there were two people when I was talking about going to apply for Hopkins. Like I went to Morgan for undergrad, to the HBCU. And so I went for psychology and I was going to go for public health. And I was working at Johns Hopkins in their school of nursing at the time. And so like there were a couple people, I'm not going to put them on blast. There were a couple people that I went to that I was working with, and I was like, just offhand, like, yeah, I'm thinking about, doing this thing. And they looked at me like, one of them said, like, I don't think that's a good decision for you. Like, I don't think you should go, and apply for Hopkins. And I was like, why not? And she was like, well, you didn't come from a good enough school to get in. And I remember like being like so enraged at that point that, I really started like trying to get into that space then. But there's so many times and so many people that look like us that are your ages, our ages and younger, as we're talking about like stuff that's happened in the past, that get those and get discouraged and don't press through and don't, for no fault of their own, but those things can be tough. And so there's so many people that like who are young adults like trying to get into this space who struggle with imposter syndrome, right? Like they are, they feel like, if they do get into this space, like they shouldn't quite be there, or they don't think that they're good enough, and they get this self-doubt. And sometimes it comes from self, but in all of our examples, sometimes it comes from other people that impart those things onto us. And where it's just kind of like, you're like, no, you're good. You get mad about it. But then in certain situations, you feel it. Like you don't necessarily like, verbalize it, but you feel it of just like, this doesn't feel great. And I wonder if I can accomplish this stuff. And so for this one, I will throw it out. Have any of you experienced imposter syndrome? And, how did you overcome it? Or how do you deal with it? Or if you actively still deal with it, because I know I do in certain spaces, but, how do you all, deal with that?
I still deal with it all the time. I think I often have to remind myself, which is hard, to be kind to myself. And it's so difficult to do. And I try to reframe it as, so my first GPO call with you, I got off the phone and I was telling myself, that was terrible. I was just like, am I talking that way about myself? Like I didn't do well. So I was going to just sit there with it. I sat there with my feelings, feeling like that. And I was just like, I don't like this. So I called Joanne and, asked her, I was like, hey, is it just me? Did I feel like, that was horrible? Or she's like, no, that's just your own self inner critic doing that. And so, and I go to therapy too. So I talk to my therapist about it all the time. I tell her that, I always get these feelings about imposter, like I'm not good enough. I don't deserve to be here. But then it just clicked with me that, that worry there is there to try to protect myself at times, but it's still difficult to deal with.
Yeah, for sure. For sure.
Well, Brandon, you and I had this conversation about a month ago when we did the other panel, and I specifically stated something to the effect of working through my imposter syndrome, something to that effect. But I think a lot of that, I think we're hard on ourselves, and I think we do need to be a lot kinder to ourselves in the moment. And of course, it sounds easy and groundbreaking to say those things, but just as much as we as clinicians help others, like we also have to remember to extend that same kindness and extend that same grace to ourselves. I think my imposter syndrome is grounded also or compounded by the fact that I'm also still a student. So it's like while I'm licensed and while I've been licensed for a few years at this point, I'm still in the process of school. So I have like this licensure mindset, and then I have this student mindset, and sometimes they don't distinctly separate from each other. So I'm constantly having to sit with my feelings and really figure out where that's coming from and where I learned that, and is there any validity to those statements. And I think a part of it is we as people aren't used to seeing us in these spaces. So if we're not in these spaces, a lot of us tend to think, well, like, damn, am I supposed to be here? But the truth is, like, absolutely, like the value that we have, the knowledge base that we have is just as valuable, if not more so, than everybody else at the table, because we have a unique lens, because of being a person of color. So it's something that I'm continuously working on. It's not linear. It does a bell curve all the time, but just being kind with yourself in those moments.
Cool. Adam, you want to jump in?
Yeah, sure. So one of the things is with that imposter syndrome for me is that it comes from just like past experiences in the field of not being valued, not being told that you're good enough, always critiquing the negative. So that carries, like even with my new position now, like my supervisor, we had a conversation and I had like forgot to do something and I was so hard on myself. And she was like, stop. She was like, where's this coming from? Why are you so hard on yourself? And I was explaining to her why, like my past experiences, I was have really been great from like supervisors and things like that. And so she was like, you're actually knocking it out of the park. And she was like, and this thing that you messed up on is small. You still had a chance to redo it and get it done. She said, it still got done. And so she was like, we never had really anybody this young in this position. So it was actually good to see that I kept trying to get things done, get them right. But it's kind of like those past experiences still linger. It still takes time to like shake it off. And I always tell people when I'm on the phone, I'm like, you got to be patient with yourself. And I'm still learning to do that with myself, like each and every day. I tell people that, they're like, oh, that's really okay. I need to start doing that. And then I'd be off the phone like, damn, well, I could have did this better. I could have did that better. So it's a learning process.
I mean, it absolutely is, and it's a tough thing to deal with. Like in my space and all those things. Like it's it's something that I've had to learn to deal with too. Like I've never, one, I didn't see myself in the spaces that I am in professionally, but being there and understanding, like one of you said like about your skill set, like being enough and like being kind to yourself and thinking about that. And I think like for us, one of the things that we have to do as like Black professionals is that we honestly have to be our own hype people. Like we have to hype ourselves up. Like we have to be like, no, we the best. Like walk in the room, like how you go walk in when you got your favorite outfit on. Like you go around your people and you just like, this is, you like, this is going on Instagram. This angle is going on Instagram. These shoes are going on Instagram. Like all of that. Like
those are the ones, the moments that you want to be like, okay, I see you, nephew. I see you,
right.
sis. Like,
right. Yeah. Absolutely. Like, for sure. And to do that, for for yourself is so, it's so critical. Like I remember there was this, it's going to sound petty, but I remember there was this one event that I was at, like it was, centered in suicide prevention. There's a lot of people there. And I had just become co-lead of this initiative that we have as a part of something else that I do. I try not to blur these lines, so I speak vaguely with some of that stuff. But like this other thing that I do, and so like we were there, and we set up this this event. We wanted the people to see us. It was myself and my co-lead, and so we were we were there. We're going to announce that we were the new leads, and we were good. I was nervous. A whole lot of people in the room. And so like I was going up to some people, like in some familiar faces, some not so familiar, like just trying to like talk and engage and to kind of get the conversation going, like to reduce my anxiety. And like that room did not want to talk to me, like at all. Like they didn't want to say anything to me. Like it was one of those real like I want to go home kind of experiences of like, why am I here? And so like we at the end, like we were going to say remarks. And so we went up, and I could visibly see on people's faces that they had no clue that I was one of the co-leads. And so then like, afterwards, the same people who didn't want to talk to me are like walking up like, hey, Brandon, we want to talk. And I was like, I gotta go. Like time's up. Like I can't, there's nothing I can do. And I know it was petty, but the people who talked to me and engaged with me, who didn't know that I was a co-lead, who didn't know like anything, but like I was a person who was interested in speaking with them, those are the people that I stayed connected to. Like, and those were those people. And so like that was one of those moments where I was like, I started to feel better about it, but it's still a continuous process. And so like, you guys have touched on this, a bit too, but you guys are all therapists, right? Like you guys are all counselors, you all are in this space, you're all licensed, but we talked about things that you all dealt with challenges and imposter syndrome and things. How do you all take care of yourselves? Like, and even outside of being therapists, like, yes, you're a therapist, but you're human beings. Like you're, young Black adults that find themselves in this space, in this reality of what the country looks like now as we're unpacking all of these, things that have been semi-undercover, but just highlighted more. Like you all have to deal with that and unpack that in your own times and manage that. Like, how do you all take care of yourselves? Adam, I'll throw it to you first.
One of the things I do to take care of myself is I have to start looking day to day differently. So usually, like being a therapist, you hear so much, you take in so much, and that weighs on you. So what I had to start learning how to do was start taking out those, like when I was working with clients, is taking out those small victories and like focusing on that. Like they did make progress doing this. Hey, they did improve in doing this. Hey, they made an effort to do this, and start focusing on those smaller victories. That's something that's helped me day to day. And even like in my position now with those phone calls, I do the same thing, like taking out those small victories. My thing is now it's just unplugging from like work, sometimes the phone, sometimes the TV, the internet, and just being in my own space and just relaxing. And I think that's like, and just being intentional with self-care and just having that time to unplug and unwind is so much useful, because there was a time where I never did that. And it became me being irritable, me being not the best person. So when I noticed that I was like, okay, this isn't right. I started more so, like I said, focusing on the positive and just unplugging and not because there's a lot of like with everything going on right now, and even before the stuff that's happening now, like reading stuff and like listening to stuff can just bring you down even more, especially when you hear it's happening to our people on a daily basis. So I learned how to take that consumption down as well. Like I'm still aware of everything that's going on, but I don't need to like read and listen to stuff as much as I used to when I get angry after like reading and hearing stuff. You just want to like, man, this is crazy. You just want to just act out. So just those two big things, I said, taking in those small victories and just limiting consumption, I think are the two ways that I help myself.
That's cool. I'll throw it to either one of you. I did that thing where I said I wasn't going to do it, and then I did it.
And then you did it anyway. My trust is fragile. So I'm a huge believer in like not pouring from an empty cup. Like that's always been my thing, probably since doing like internship for my master's program. But as clinicians, like we tend to give so much of ourselves, to the point where, you know, by the time you're done seeing clients, there's not really much left most times to give to yourself. So I'm actually an introvert. It might not seem like it, but I'm a true introvert. So I have to be mindful of how I get my energy and what depletes it. So I've done things recently where I limit the amount of clients I see per day. Like I know once I hit a certain limit, I'm not good for anybody afterwards. And I really focus on giving good care. And I know that I can't do that after a certain amount of time. So I will stop every day after I've hit this quota of clients for the day. I'm also a big proponent of unplugging because that is how I refill my cup, particularly being an introvert. So I will put my phone on do not disturb, and I will, spend some time after clients not talking. I think silence is a beautiful thing after a day of working with clients and dealing with such heavy topics. My self-care is like reading, comedy, being intentional about the things that I watch and the things that I read, because it does compound, as Adam was saying, especially with everything that's going on right now. So certain things I might not watch because I know that I don't have the capacity to digest it in an adaptive way. But I also think just as important as self-care is community care. So really keeping in touch with my tribe, and keeping in touch of those who uplift me, and of course, reciprocally, those are also the people that I really look to that help support me, especially during those harder days. So I think those two things, self-care and community care, are super important to me.
Absolutely. Aijahlon?
So my self-care looks like I've been reading more. So for more fiction work rather than just reading nonfiction, DSM stuff or whatever. But yeah, so self-care, I like how you both have stated that you've been intentional with it. And I feel like that's important. It's intentional that I take my psychiatric meds every day. So having that, my psychiatrist, going to therapy, and also being able to talk to my friends and others who are in the field that look like me. And so we can talk about how things have gone. Especially, I can't talk about how someone may have responded to me to another white person the same way as I would talk to one of y'all, since y'all understand. So, and I also listen to the read, which is completely as black as hell. I love it. So, it helps me unplug and unwind and everything. So that's how I do my self-care.
The read is super lit.
It is.
Super lit.
It's lit.
I feel out of the loop. I feel out of the loop. Is it a podcast?
It is.
Okay, I'm glad I got it right.
7 years.
It's
We're
so
gonna send you
good.
an episode so you can listen to it.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. I'm gonna have to do that now that I feel out of the loop. I'm definitely gonna have to do that. But yeah, like that self-care piece is important, like as well as the community care thing too. Like, and for part of it for me is like being able to tap into stuff that's like, humorous, even if it covers like this kind of stuff or something that covers it in a different angle. I don't know if you all have seen Lovecraft County on HBO. That. You should, if you're into horror, it's cool. It made, I know some people were like, I didn't know what it was, and they watched it.
I'm doing it in chunks.
But it's good though. Like, and I'm not into horror. Like, I'm not a big horror person, but like the way that it like subtly like taps into other like things that are like really, really current or about our experience is really dope. And so like getting those times and doing that. And so I'm definitely going to check out the read. And my own way of doing my community care, I want to say again that you all are, dope and brilliant. And so like on behalf of me, thank you all for the work that you're doing. appreciate and applaud the kind of things that you guys are working on and involved with. Aijahlon, you couldn't have crushed your first call any better. I don't know where that would have come from, like doing that stuff. Like Adam being a complete unicorn and being entrenched, into Baltimore City schools, like working with kids that grew up the same way we did in the middle of Baltimore City, and then transitioning to something like grief. Like that's a tough mantle to carry. And Karen, you're going to be a whole doctor, sis. So
Hey, one day.
Look, whether it's now, 5 years from now, 10 years from now, it's coming.
Oh no, not that far. 2023. 2023.
It's definitely coming. But yeah, just from me to you, I appreciate you all there. So another thing I wanted to give you all an opportunity to talk about is, like, you are in the mental health space in different spaces. You all have different specialties. Some work micro, some work macro. Some of you work and do more direct client, some of you do more program work, some of you do a mix of those things. And so, like, you have your experiences, and so I want to give credit to your experiences right now by allowing you all just to talk about, like, what, if you look in this space in 10 years, you guys will probably still be in this space doing some stuff. Like, so, like, look future 10 years from now. So, like, what is one particular, I'll give you 1 to 2, like, particular evolutions that you want to see in Black mental health? Like, if you look 10 years from now, like, what would be the thing you'd be like, oh, we did it. Like, we did this thing, or we focused on this area, we, addressed this thing, and, or things have shifted and Black mental health looks different, or the Black experience looks different. Like, what would you hope to see, like, 10 years out from now? And I'll start with Karen.
So for me, I think it's of course I'll still be in the field, but for me it's simple. Excuse me. I want to see more of us. Like, I want to see the amount of Black clinicians, Black social workers, Black psychologists. I want it to match the U.S. Census. Like, 2019 U.S. Census estimates Black folk at 13.3%. In psychology, it's like 6%. If we talk about neuropsychology, it's 1.2%. Like, it's never comparable to the US population. Now, conversely, or comparatively, if you think of white folk take up US Census estimates 2019, 76% of the population. But 84% of the psychology active workforce is white. So they're overrepresented, and literally BIPOC everywhere across the board underrepresented. So in 10 years, I want to see more of us, because we have a better understanding of certain intersections in our identities and how to best navigate the systems in which we find ourselves in by no choice of our own, to begin to see that shift. So I feel like if we're there, then we can really create the change that we want to see. So that's my first thing that I would like to see in 10 years. And after that, I just want to see us thriving, not just surviving. I want to see us thriving and doing the good work, not only in the field, but in the community as a whole. So I think it really starts with visibility and membership first.
Aijahlon, you want to go?
I'm going to piggyback off of what Karen said, seeing more of us in the field, but also seeing more of Black people in leadership positions and roles, because there aren't that many of us in leadership positions and directors of offices or commissioners. So I was hesitant to even, state that I wanted to apply for a leadership role, because, I didn't see that many of us in leadership positions. It was until I talked to my former internship supervisor, who is Black and is the director of a Medicaid program, and said that you should go for it. Talk to them. So I feel like having more Black persons in leadership roles gives us the opportunity to to help break down that imposter syndrome, saying that I'm not capable, I'm not able to do it because I don't see anybody looking like me that's in it. So I would like to see more of us in that role and leadership and mental health. The second thing, I don't know. I just know I want more for us because we deserve it.
I'm with it. Adam?
I think piggybacking what Karen said, like you said, just seeing more us in the field. Like working in Baltimore City Public Schools in terms of like mental health, in terms of social workers and therapists, it'd be like me and like we used to have these meetings of all the Spanish school-based mental health programs. And it's like 10% Black, but 90% is white. But we're working in a school system that's probably 95% African American. So for me, it was always like, this don't make any sense. And then like when you hear conversations of like, oh, they doing this and oh, they doing that. And it's like, you don't know the experience. You don't know the background. You don't know the culture. And so that's why it's so important that we're in it, because we know it. We've experienced it. We lived it. And that's why it's so, and then also for my other things that I want to see is also kind of like in terms of like money and grant funding going to these Black mental health organizations, that they don't have to jump through 40,000 hoops just to get this money or look at being as inferior to other organizations. Like these organizations are new, these organizations just don't have the resources. So that's why they always trying to get the kind of like the scraps or anything like that. And so I want to see that like, no, we're getting this money and that we're making these pushes to service African Americans. So that's like my other big thing. It's just, like I said, representation and like the funding for it. I think those are two major key points that I want to see.
All of that. Everything that y'all said, I'm with it. Yeah, I agree with everything. And I think it's, I think it's within reach. I think we're starting to see some shifts. And, the more that people can see you all in your spaces and know what you're doing, like, I think it'll expand. But we definitely need more leadership. We need more representation, because we do better when we are connected to people that look like us. Like in therapy, like we all know that, like it's a consistent thing. And I'm good with cultural competency. I'm not saying that. First of all, I believe in cultural humility, not cultural competency per se. So, getting more into that space and, because you can't be competent in my culture and my experiences. Like it just doesn't work like that. Like, I've grown up in Baltimore City. I don't think I said this on camera, but Adam's my brother. So like we grew up in Baltimore City. Like we had those experiences naturally, that we have, and each of you, have those experiences as well. And so like those things that we're able to bring to the table, is key. Like I have a therapist and it's great to get to those conversations where we're like, like, and then they did something and he's like, how they do, or what they
and
like.
we be knowing.
Right. It's just like instant. I don't have to say anything else. I don't have to like go down and try to find a way to articulate, what this microaggression felt like and why I was mad and why I walked out of the meeting and didn't say nothing and then packed myself and went home. Like, like it's hard to get there, but with more people like that, or people like us in those spaces, like we can definitely do that. So it's, definitely something I think we can work towards. And so like with this conversation, like before we wrap up, what advice do you all have for other young Black professionals who are interested in mental health? Like they may be going through undergrad right now, they may be in high school, like they're interested in it, they don't know what, quite where they're going, or for young Black professionals who are starting to get into the mental health space that are experiencing some of the things that you all talked about tonight. So some of those challenges, some of those imposter syndrome feelings, like what advice would you have for, any of those those scenarios, for people who want to get further and get to the places that you all are in. And Adam, I'll start with you.
The first thing I would say is look what's going on in the world. Even though it's been going on for centuries, but now since we have social media and all these outlets, now it's on the forefront. But look at what we're going through. That should be a drive that Black mental health is needed. Another thing that I'm going to say is for young people who want to get, Black African Americans who want to get into this field, is stick with each other. Because there's going to be a lot of times you're going to enter into spaces, it's only like 1 or 2 of y'all, maybe 5. And so the key is that we have to rely on one another, because a lot of times they're not going to support you the way that you need to be supported, or hype you up the way you need to be hyped up, or guide you the way you need to be guided. So you have to be there for each other. And it's so important because when I was in the field, every time I saw another Black person who was like newly hired or was an intern, I would like go out of my way to introduce myself, help them out, ask them if they need anything, give them my number, because I really didn't have that. So I would always just be pressed just to kind of help the next Black clinician. And one of the most discouraging things that, like, this is why I say it's so important that we stick together, is that I had a Black supervisor who really wasn't supportive of the Black clinicians who were under her. And that was so disheartening. And we knew that and we felt it. And it's kind of like you talk all this stuff like, oh, I'm down for y'all, I'm down for our people. You wear the kente and all of that. And you just like, I'm just black. But then we were the ones getting slighted. We were being the ones getting thrown under the bus. We weren't the ones being the supportive, but the white clinicians were being treated differently. And so, and that hurts. And it brings in anger, brings in frustration and things like that. But when you see another Black clinician who's kind of on your side, who wants to like help you, support you, guide you, it's so uplifting, and it gives you that motivation, that passion to keep going. So that's like my biggest thing, is just look out and support one another in any shape, form, or fashion. Even if you got to pull somebody up and just be like, hey man, that wasn't the best way to do it, still do that, because if we don't look out for ourselves, no one else will. So that's my big takeaway from that, is just be supportive of one another.
Not the kente. But yeah, I mean that's so critical. Yeah, I'll save my stuff for the end, but I had to jump in and say that. Aijahlon?
Yeah, I would just say to stick with it. I know for me, in working in macro practice, it was finding that connection with the older aunties that work there, to make sure, they told me the ins and outs, who to pay attention to, or just to, make sure I do what I can to make sure I do well. And so, yeah, I feel like if you have friends who, or Black persons and friends who have or are going through working in the mental health field or in graduate school for it, is to be able to tell them or give them advice or resources on what helped you and what worked for you, in order to help them gain an upper hand, because we already don't have an upper hand anyway. So I feel like just continuing to be there for the ones that come after you is very important. And that's what assisted me.
Absolutely. That's definitely definitely key. And so, which is one of the reasons why I reached out to you, like when when we got connected, to make sure that we do that. And I try to make sure to do the same thing, because if not, and if we don't, like, we're gonna lose people out of this field. For sure. Karen?
I mean, what really is there left to say? Like, everyone spoke so eloquently. But I guess to echo those things, I would say to, be available. Like, now that I think about it, I don't recall having people in the field that were available. I did a very caring thing, and I created those spaces. So when I was able to get into, get the license, get the job, like I positioned myself with aunties as well. And I officially told them to say, hey, okay, so you're adopting me. So what's up? How do we, do X, Y, and Z? And because I didn't come from training where I had that readily available to me, I am very cognizant of making sure that I create that space for others. There's been plenty of times where, people will hit you up on LinkedIn or Psychology Today profiles and ask questions about getting into programs, whether it's, for your licensure, whether it's for adopt programs. And I'm always absolutely going to speak with them, because I never want to feel like at the outset that I'm turning people away from the field, a field that so desperately needs people of color, Black women, Black men, et cetera, et cetera. So I think that's always really important for me. And then when, like Adam was saying, when it gets tough, stick to your supports. Create community with others in your programs, because it makes all the difference. So that's what I would say.
Y'all are so dope, so awesome. I'm so happy that we were able to have this conversation. Again, if it wasn't for my own restrictions, I wish we could go longer than this. I may have to pull y'all back in for a different conversation, because y'all energy is so awesome. But again, I've said it once, I've said it 1,000 times. Thank you to each of you all for what you're doing. Not to get all soapy, but I'm proud of each of you all for, being in this space and, fighting through whatever challenges that you had to get here to, represent for our people. We do better when we see people that look like us. We can drive change. We can drive institutional changes in the places that we are. And we can change the narrative about Black mental health. And so with that, I just want to say thank you again for being a part of this. Again, thank you all for watching and being a part of this. Thank you all so much for joining this conversation, and look forward to the next video. I have another one coming, I guess, in 2 weeks from now. But I appreciate you all for being a part of this.
Thanks for having us, man.
Yeah.
Thanks.